What's up, I'm Troubleshoot. In this relatively quick guide, I'll be showing you how to set up a Rust server completely from scratch, and as the primitive update just released, I'll be showing you how to set that up as well once we have our server going. But for now, before we begin, if you're looking to host a Rust server, Minecraft, or anything else for that matter, I'd highly recommend you check out Apex Hosting, the sponsor of this video. They provide super low latency DDoS protected servers with automatic backups and fantastic customer support. Simply click the first link down below, check the top right for the current discount code. Right now it's APEX25 for 25% off your first invoice. Get started, select your game, be it Minecraft or in this case Rust, select your server size, order now, and in no time you'll have a game server set up and ready for you to customize as you see fit. Thank you to Apex Hosting for sponsoring this guide. So, setting up a Rust server from scratch. How do we do it? Well, first of all, we need to download the server files. In the description down below, you'll find a link to my blog, where you'll find this video as a text copy as well as all of the commands and things that we'll need to copy paste for later on. The first thing you'll need to do is download SteamCMD. You'll find a link right over here. Clicking this link starts a direct download for SteamCMD for Windows from this page here. So, clicking this, we've now got SteamCMD downloaded. Open the zip, and we'll need to extract this to a new place where we'll be hosting our server. For me, I'll house my server on my desktop. I'll just make a new folder here called Rust Server. Sounds good. We'll open it up, and inside of here, we need two folders. One of them will be for SteamCMD. I'll call this SteamCMD Creative. Then we'll need a place for our actual game files to live. I'll make a new folder called Rust. Then from our SteamCMD zip that we just downloaded, drag this into SteamCMD. So now we have our Rust folder here for our game server files and SteamCMD, which will help us actually download these game files. You can now close and delete the zip and head back to this article page here. So in order to actually use SteamCMD, it's a command line tool, so we'll need to run some commands to interact with it. First of all, to download and keep our Rust server up to date, we'll create an update.bat file, which should contain this text over here. So I'll click the copy button here, and inside of this folder, where we have Rust and SteamCMD, right-click New and select Text Document. You should see New Text Document.txt, select everything, and call this update.bat. If you didn't see .txt and changing it to .bat doesn't give you a pop-up like this, then make sure you have file name extensions visible. On Windows 11, choose View followed by Show, and then make sure file name extensions and hidden items are ticked. On Windows 10, the ribbon bar at the very top should have a similar view tab and checkboxes on the far right. Once you've done this, right-click and choose Edit to open this with Notepad or any simple text editor. Paste it in here, and now we need to do a bit of replacing. First of all, our SteamCMD folder. What we need to do is navigate into SteamCMD, then right-click at the very top up here and copy address. We'll then paste it in here, so we have quote, followed by the path to our SteamCMD folder, /SteamCMD.exe, end quote. Then our force install directory, which is the Rust game server folder, we need to replace now as well inside of these quotes. So, inside of our Rust folder here, we'll once again right-click and copy address. So we'll paste that in, and this should also be surrounded by quotes. Once we've done this, we can save this, close this, and double-click it to start setting up SteamCMD in that folder. You'll see there's some more files that appear here, and shortly after, Rust itself should start downloading. It's going to be about a 9 gig download, so this could take some time depending on the speed of your internet and your drive. In the future, when you need to update your Rust server, simply run this update.bat file, and it should verify the files that are already there, replacing anything if they're broken, and of course, bring it up to date. This is useful for the monthly updates that happen, but we can automate this process, and we'll get there in just a bit. Once it's done, press any key to close this, and now our Rust folder has a bunch of Rust server files. Fantastic. How do we actually start it? Well, heading back to this page, scroll down, and you'll see a section called Starting Your Server. Start.bat, this text over here. Once again, we'll copy this, right-click, New Text Document, and we'll change the name to start.bat. We'll change the extension, right-click, and edit once more to edit in Notepad. Now we'll paste in this again, and the last thing we need to do is set the Rust folder over here. So we'll open up the Rust folder once more, right-click, copy address, and replace this here. There we go. Keep in mind, if this path has any spaces, say Rust space server, make sure to surround this in double quotes, just to be safe. Then, looking down further on, we've actually got our server start command over here. The game server runs on port 28015, query 28016, and the app port, which is the Rust Plus app, on 28017. In a moment, we'll be handling our firewall and things like that, but for now, you'll find app.listen IP followed by your public IP. You need to Google what is my IP and fill in that address here. So let's say 127.0.0.1 is my public IP address facing the internet. Google tells me this is my address. That's what I'll be typing in here. Then we can customize a few more things like changing the server map to something like Happers Island if you wish. You can change the seed over here and the world size. The bigger your world, the longer this takes to actually start up. 5,000 is a pretty big world. I'll change this to 2,000 for now for a much quicker startup just for testing. Then the max players, I'll leave as 250. Server hostname is currently Troubleshoot's Rust Guide server, but make sure to change this. And finally, if the Rust server were to crash, it'll just restart at the very end. Now, keep in mind, once we save this file, check back to this blog post, scroll down, and over here you'll find some more useful commands that we can add. For example, we can add server description, server URL for a website, header image, server game mode, and server tags, as well as a few extra things. If you'd like to remotely control your server using Archon, make sure to add Archon password and Archon port. If you happen to add Archon, keep in mind that this extra port will need to be added to your firewall and things like that. But for now, taking a step back, automatically updating our server. This block of code over here looks very similar to our update.bat right at the very top. That's because it's practically the same thing. We'll copy this, which is right underneath the actual start.bat. So here we go. And inside of our start.bat file, right after :start, we'll add a few extra new lines and we'll paste it in here. This means that when our server starts, it'll update our server by running this command, then it'll start the server, and if it crashes, it'll restart. Fantastic. Keep in mind, I've only got app update here. We haven't got validate, which is in the install command, simply because this won't run through the existing game files and verify integrity of game files as Steam does. It should be a lot quicker to start up our server, and this will only update our server if an update is available. It's not going to bother checking files and things like that otherwise. All we need to do now is replace the SteamCMD folder with, you guessed it, SteamCMD, right-click, copy address, paste it in here, make sure the quotes are still okay at the beginning and end, and it's steamcmd/steamcmd.exe. Then our force install directory, which is our Rust game folder, once again we need to set over here. So we'll open up the Rust folder, copy address, and paste it in inside of the quotes here. Just like that, when we save this and start it, it'll check for updates and start up our server, restart if crashed. Fantastic. So let's actually start up our server and see how this thing works. We'll double-click start.bat. Now, Steam should check for updates, and very shortly after, in about 10 to 20 seconds, our server should be starting up. And this could take a couple of minutes, especially if it's your first time loading this particular world by using the map seed and things like that. So it'll asset warm up, and the rest as Rust does usually, taking just as long, if not a bit longer. For now, while this is starting, I'm going to start up my actual Rust client in the background, and we should be able to join it on the same computer that we're running it. So let's do it. Once your game starts up, verify your server has actually started up. You'll know this as it's run through all of the different loading bits. A lot of the text here seems to just stick around. It's only really this top bit that updates. That's just a weird quirk with how the Rust server works. So you can ignore all this text down here and just focus on this top bit up here. To actually join your server, hit F1 in game to bring up your console and use the command connect space followed by your IP address. So, as we're connecting to our server, which is running on the same computer as us, we'll use 127.0.0.1 or just type in localhost, one word. By hitting enter now, it'll reach out to our local server and try to connect. If it's still starting up, you'll receive an error message. Otherwise, it could take some time to load in. It seems to still be starting, so we can leave both of these going, and we should eventually be dropped into the server, ready to go. Alright, so now that the server has successfully started up, trying to connect once more, this time it's actually working. Asset warm up, and eventually we'll wake up in game as we do usually. And there we go, spacebar, bam, we're now in our own server here. When we type something, you should see it appear in the console here alongside our Steam ID. So this is your Steam64 ID. This is a unique identifier for your account. What I'd recommend you do is you select your code here, starting in 7, right-click to copy, and then type in owner ID, one word, space, followed by this Steam ID, space, followed by a username. This can be anything. I'll call this admin. Bam. Just like that, we on our account now have administrator privileges as we're the server's owner. Now, in order to actually save this and make it persistent, type server.write CFG, one word, and hit enter. Then you'll see config saved. Now we've been set as an admin, and that option that we changed has now been saved to our configuration files. Now all we need to do is restart our game and reconnect to the server for the state to change on our side as well. So once again, F1 connect, and let's do localhost this time. Now we're connecting back to our server, and now you should wake up with admin privileges. Hit F1, followed by items at the very top, and now you should be able to spawn in anything you want. I'll arm myself with an AK, there you go. Using the search feature, just by typing, we can type 556, spawn in 1000 ammo, reload, and just like that, we're set up to go. So now you have your own server running and you're an admin on it, but nobody else can join you. It's just you. How do we fix this? Well, there's a few things we need to do. I'll start by closing out of my game, though this isn't required, and I'll scroll down on this page here once more. We've joined our own server. The next step is letting other people connect. First of all, we need to handle our Windows firewall. All we need to do is copy these commands over here using the copy button, and this will allow us to automatically allow our Rust server in and out of our PC on the ports 28015 all the way through 28017, TCP and UDP. That just means that connections to our computer will come through fine when they use one of these ports here, which are our server ports. If you would like people to access, say, Archon over the internet, make sure to expand 28017 to be 28018, for example. For now, I'll just copy this, and we need to paste this into an admin PowerShell window. Hit start, type in PowerShell, and run this as administrator. Inside of here, paste in this command and hit enter a few times just to make sure that the whole thing runs. Just like that, we've now allowed Rust through our Windows firewall. If you're using something like an antivirus with a firewall built in, you'll need to allow these ports there as well. Now, the final step before other people can join is they need to actually reach your computer through your router and things like that. The easiest way to do that is port forwarding. While this sounds scary, it's actually super simple. Let me break it down for you. Open up your router and sign in with your admin username and password, and then find your way across to security, port forwarding, or something along these lines. It could be application forwarding, game forwarding, port forwarding, anything like that. Inside of here, you'll see an in and an out port, as well as a protocol, TCP, UDP, or preferably both, and finally a local IP to send requests for these ports too. To get our local IP address, open up a new command prompt window, PowerShell or anything like that. So start, command prompt, and inside of here, type in ipconfig, one word. Hit enter, and now look for the way that you're connected to the internet. In my case, it's Ethernet. Find your IPv4 address, usually, and it should be 192.168 something. In my case, it's 192.168.150. As you can see, it's already got most of it entered for me. All I need to do is punch in the last few digits, in my case, 50. Then we'll need to tell it which ports we'd actually like to forward to our computer. As previously, that should be 28015 through 28017 or 28018 if you want to forward Archon so people can connect to your Archon panel and admin your server remotely. For me though, it'll just be 28015 through 17. As I can enter a range here instead of having to do them separately, you may have to comma separate them or something like that depending on your router settings. I'll type in 28015 to 28017. Then, as I need to do this twice, one for the external and internal, so 28015 to 28017, and the protocol will be both TCP and UDP. If you can only select one of these, do it once for TCP, then do it again for UDP. And if you can only enter ports separately, one by one, you'll need to do 28015, 6, and 7. We'll add new, and just like that, I've now port forwarded on my router here. It's that simple. Keep in mind you'll need to Google Google for instructions for your particular router, as things may be different, and if you have multiple routers connected in a chain, so you've got your fiber box, a router, then it goes to another router in your room, then to your PC, you'll need to port forward at each step along the way to the next device in the chain. If you need help with multi-router port forwarding, you'll find a breakdown guide linked down below. And a final thing to mention is if you've tried everything correctly and nothing's working, port forwarding may be blocked by your ISP. You may need to contact them and ask them to enable it on your account. Usually it's free and it's just a few clicks for them. You'll be able to port forward in no time. With that out of the way, all you need to do now is Google what is my IP address, and people should be able to use connect followed by your IP address to connect to your server. And after a few minutes of your server just running, if it's successfully port forwarded and allowed through your Windows firewall, it should eventually show up on the in-game list and people can search for the name. Scrolling down further, we've already covered giving yourself admin. The last thing we need to cover is saving and closing your server. So now that you're actually able to have other people join your server, including yourself, when you're done hosting your server or you want to restart it, don't just close this window here, as that'll shut down your server quite violently. Instead, use server.save, hit enter, and this will save your server, the world, and everything in it, and then use quit to graciously bring your server to a halt. If I hit enter, it saves and then closes. As we've got it set up to automatically restart, it'll start updating and restart our server, so I'll just close out of it here. That's it. The next time we want people to join our server, run the start.bat file and make sure that the Rust server is running properly on your system. That's it. Keep in mind the Rust server does automatically save every hour. You can change this by opening up your Rust server, followed by server, then my server identity. Yes, it's quite literally called that, followed by CFG, and inside of here, you can make a new file called server.cfg, once again replacing .txt. Open this with any text editor. I'll use Notepad. And inside of here, we can set some commands for our server. As you can see, there should be a few in the server auto.cfg, which are just a few examples. And we'll be using server.saveinterval, followed by 600, which is the default. If you'd like to leave it at every hour, you don't need to create this file or set this, but you can change it to be 300 to save automatically every half an hour, for example. You can set this if you wish, otherwise just ignore it. It's fine, your server should save automatically every hour. Now, excuse the continuity break, but let's quickly talk setting eras and game modes on your server. For example, making it primitive or making it, more recently, medieval. So there are two commands you need to know of. Scrolling all the way to the bottom of this page, you'll find eras and game modes and how to create a primitive or medieval Rust server. Eras and game modes. You can set a game mode by adding plus server.gamemode to your start.bat, including vanilla, survival, softcore, hardcore, and primitive. There's a couple of testing and development ones that Facepunch have mentioned, including Deathmatch, Team Deathmatch, One Death, King of the Hill Solo, and Team, but these ones aren't used anywhere. For the most part, it's vanilla, survival, softcore, hardcore, and primitive. Vanilla shouldn't be used at all. It's sort of there just as a placeholder, and it'll be used when plus server.gamemode isn't used at all. Survival is practically the same, and it's set by using just blank quotes, so plus server game mode and just quotes. But using plus server game mode, softcore or hardcore make the game easier or harder based on what you choose. From what I understand, hardcore blocks access to certain features, and softcore seems to just give you more when you're playing the game. Hardcore was an official thing being developed by Facepunch, and since they shut down their servers a year or two ago, hardcore isn't being developed at all anymore, at least as far as I understand. However, primitive is what we're going to be focusing on. Plus server.gamemode followed by primitive allows us to lock access to items, features, monuments, and more, including giving us access to the brand new medieval era. Whenever you set a game mode, it's a good idea to include it in your tags as well, just so people on the search list can find it too. So add to your plus server.tags something like vanilla, primitive if you're making it a primitive vanilla server, for example. Otherwise, just primitive or whatever you want really. Once you've got a game mode set to something like primitive, you can set eras. This allows us to create a medieval server, which is what I spoke about way back at the beginning of this video. We'll need to make our server game mode primitive first, and then we can use a new command plus server.era followed by primitive medieval, spelled like that, frontier, or Rust. By default, Rust is the usual era, and it allows you access to everything all the monuments generate, etc. Then we have primitive, which is the most locked down version that blocks access to metal buildings, most weapons, ammunition, ammunition, and a ton of different things, including certain monuments. But medieval is brand new and the one that we're focusing on here. I've got a little list explaining exactly what goes on here, but basically it stops giant excavator, missile silo, and oil rig, as well as underwater labs from generating. NPCs like cargo don't appear. Ammunition, most weapons, chainsaws, jackhammers, full metal armor can't be crafted and are completely blocked. Minicopters can't be found or bought. The tech tree becomes way more expensive, and raiding will need to be done mostly through siege weapons, as well as a couple of extra things. By doing plus server game mode primitive and plus server era medieval, we get access to this brand new game mode. The main difference between primitive and medieval, which are practically the same, is that medieval allows us access to a revolver, a blunderbuss, double barrel shotgun, and a few other minor changes here and there. So to make a primitive server, we'd use a combination like this: plus server game mode primitive, plus server era medieval, and plus server tags. Vanilla, primitive, and medieval sounds pretty good. By simply adding this to our start.bat as such right over here, making sure we don't have any duplicates, we can save this and restart our server. Just a quick note, you can do this mid-wipe and just by running these commands on the server, but by changing any of these options mid-wipe, all players' inventories are completely reset. Instead of restarting the server, I'll simply join it and show you what happens if you happen to change it mid-wipe, and of course, what it does. So once again, connect localhost, and when we load in, I'll run the commands in the console to change it mid-game. I've spawned a couple AKs here. Let's go ahead and run these commands. So, first of all, I'll change server game mode to primitive. When we hit enter, it'll think for a moment, delete a bunch of objects, and as soon as it does a whole bunch of changes which take quite a bit of time, it seems we were kicked because of packet flooding, but the server's just stressing out. We'll connect localhost once more, and you should see our inventory is clean. So, surprisingly not, we've still got AKs and things, that's interesting, but items should be restricted, and yes, they are. Everything in red can't be created in-game, but it can be spawned in. The reason I think I kept these AKs is simply because I'm an owner using owner ID, so it didn't wipe my inventory and I can still spawn these things from here. So these are restricted on the weapon tab, construction, these ones, items, resources, attire, tools, medical, food, ammunition, traps, miscellaneous, component, electrical, fun, that's pretty much it. But we haven't set the game mode to medieval quite just yet. So for example, the double barrel shotgun is currently locked. What we can do is, in our console once more, run server era medieval, and once this thinks for a short while, it should make a bunch of changes and we may need to reconnect once more. Reconnecting, F1, changing away from this tab and changing back. There we go, DB's unlocked, as well as a couple of other things that should have been previously locked. Here's the weapon tab, construction, items, resources, attire, tools, medical, food, ammunition, traps, miscellaneous, component, electrical, and fun. So some things have been unlocked, as this is now the medieval era. So now you can switch from a double barrel to a single-handed weapon and get ready for some medieval action. Of course, if you change these things via your console, you should use server.write CFG to save changes, or more preferably, just make sure you set them properly in your start.bat file like I have here. And with that, we've successfully now set up our Rust server. Keep in mind, if you like to install plugins or mods, you'll need to install something called umod. If you wish to do so, you'll find a guide coming out in just a few days that shows you exactly how to do that. From start to finish, I'll show you how to install plugins on your server and get things going there. For now though, thank you for watching. Thank you again to Apex Hosting for sponsoring this guide. Mine's been Troubleshoot, and I'll see you all next time. Ciao.